All right, everybody, good morning. Sorry to break up all your conversations. We got a little late start this morning. We had a lot of people for worship and Holy Communion this morning. We have all the beautiful quilts laid out for Lutheran World Relief Quilt Sunday, so that's all part of worship today. So today we're finishing the book of Genesis. So if you don't have a Bible, you can grab one from the table, or there's some up here as well. It's chapters 42 through 50 is what we're going to be looking at. Last week we told the beginning of the story of Joseph, or Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, if any of you have seen that musical. But after Joseph was sold into slavery down in Egypt, Joseph prospered there. He ended up, by his interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams, he got raised into second in command of all of Egypt and made sure that they saved up lots of grain during the 7 years of plenty, so that they had plenty to spare during the 7 years of famine. And during that famine, just in like the first 2 years, his own brothers came looking for food. And Egypt was the only place that had food. And so they went there to buy grain. As we look at chapter 42, you see that when his brothers, when Jacob, their father, sent them down, he sent all of them except for one. Do you know which one that was? Benji, yeah, Benjamin. And why didn't he want to send him?
He was the last son, and his wife died giving birth to him, and became very favorite.
Right.
Joseph was dead, who had been his favorite, so now Benjamin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he thought Joseph was dead, and Benjamin, the other son of Rachel, was like the youngest and his most precious one, because that was his favorite wife out of the 4 that he had. Playing favorites again. So he kept Benjamin and sent the other 10 brothers down to Egypt to buy food. So what happened when they got there and came to this second in command of all of Egypt?
His dreams came true on their bowed down.
Yes, those very dreams that got him in trouble with his brothers and his parents. You're all going to bow down to me someday. It all came true. Here they are, bowing down, begging to be able to buy bread.
They don't know it's Joseph.
Yeah.
He knows them, but they don't know.
Why didn't they recognize him?
He's just like an Egyptian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally different garb, probably shaved head, elaborate makeup, all this stuff. And he was also speaking to them through a Hebrew interpreter. So they would have heard him speak Egyptian. After, any idea how long it had been since they had sold him into slavery?
10 years.
Yeah, it was at least that. In chapter 37, it tells us at the beginning of the story, it tells us that, when he was having all those dreams, he was only 17 years old. And that was when they sold him into slavery. That's when he was 17. Good morning. Got extra copies. The first one there on the left. We're looking at the end of the Joseph story. So,
does the Bible say he was talking to him through an interpreter? Or is that just the way they did that?
Yes, no, it both. I mean, that's what they did. Yeah. So let's see. This was in chapter 42.
Verse 23 of 42. Verse 23.
Oh, since he was an interpreter.
Right. Yeah. So verse 8 says, Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them. And And so he accuses them of being spies. You're just here to see the nakedness of the land. You're trying to find our weaknesses. And they say, no, we're not. And we're 12 brothers, sons of one man in Canaan, and the youngest is with our father, and one is no more. But Joseph's like, no, you're all spies, and the only way that you're going to prove that you're not is if you bring your younger brother. You say you have a 12th son. There's a 12th son. Bring him. And I'm going to keep one of you here in my custody until you come back. So then and then they're just despondent because Benjamin's the favorite. If they don't bring, if they tell Dad they need to bring Benjamin, and they had to leave one behind, oh, this is not going to be good. And they said to one another, this is verse 21, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of his soul. He begged us, and we did not listen. This is why this distress has come upon us. They were remembering Joseph. They sold him into slavery all those years ago, and now it's coming back on us. And Reuben said, didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? You didn't listening, so now there comes a reckoning for his blood. And then they did not know that they were talking to each other in Hebrew, and Joseph understood everything they were saying. But they didn't know that because there was an interpreter between them. So he was using this interpreter, and that's another reason they didn't recognize his voice. So, yeah, he treated them kind of harshly, and they thought, oh, we're getting what we deserve.
He was having fun with them.
A little bit. Yeah. So, how about you? When someone has wronged you, are you more likely to seek revenge or reconciliation?
Ignore him.
Yeah, or you just try and brush it off. I mean,
You probably want to seek revenge, but you don't.
right. Yep. And like Paul, the apostle,
Thank you.
we know what we're supposed to do, and yet we tend to do the thing that we hate. It's so easy to give in to wanting revenge and to give them what they gave to you, or worse, which only spirals out of control. Like Jacob's sons, are you still paying the price or reaping the effects of a mistake that you've made earlier in your life? Sometimes our decisions haunt us.
Sometimes you don't know which the situation is such, you don't know which way to turn.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes life is confusing, and you're like, what do I do with this? How do I handle it? And we just don't know what to do. So how do we find our way through times like that?
Pray about it.
Yep. Ask for God's help. What else is helpful in times like that where you're confused about what path to take?
I think so much talking with other believers, and I think Satan wants us to think that we're alone in our struggles, and you would be so surprised when you talk with people that they can relate.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much power in being vulnerable with people that you trust, that love the Lord, and asking for them, to pray for you and with you and to help you process what you're going through.
Absolutely. We don't have to go it alone. There's lots of other people. We in the midst of the pain and the confusion and stuff, it's easy to go, woe is me, and just get kind of curved in on yourself. But when you open yourself up and are willing to talk with others and ask their help, you'd be surprised how many people can relate and, or at least will be willing to be there for you and walk alongside you. So what happened when Joseph's brothers returned home? This is chapter 43, if you want to take a peek there. Well, yeah, so, and even before that,
They found that their money was still in their green sacks.
yes, they head home, and here's all their money inside their sacks. They're like, oh man, are we in trouble? How did this get here? We know we paid for this, but here's all our money and why was their money in their sacks? Joseph had told his steward, right, put all of it back inside their sacks. And, how does Jacob take that?
Afraid.
Yeah, he's absolutely afraid. And, because they told him, here's what happened. He accused us of being spies, and he said, and he kept Simeon there and said, bring your youngest brother to me, and then I'll let him go. But did Jacob want to do that? Not at all. And so they just kind of gave Simeon up. Like,
lost one son, he didn't want even more.
Exactly.
He thought he lost two sons, in a sense, Joseph
Right.
and Simeon back in Egypt.
Yep. It's like, if you take Benjamin, I'll lose, everything. The one that's most important to me. But what happened in chapter 43?
Well, they had to go back.
Yeah, why?
Well, they needed food again.
They went through everything that they had bought, and it was still famine. This is only 2 years.
We do not know who put our money in our sack.
Right. Yep. We have no idea about this. But we've got to go, so his dad is saying, go buy some more food. But we can't. He said, we've got to bring the youngest. And so finally he gave in, said, okay, and take some of the choice fruits of the land with you. Bring some presents, kind of sweeten the deal a little bit. Maybe it was an oversight, and take double the money, because you're going to return what we were supposed to give, and maybe it was just an oversight. And take your brother, and may God Almighty grant you mercy, that He may send back your brother and Benjamin. And so they went, and so they wrestled with that for a long time, that decision. When your family is trying to make a decision and you kind of come to an impasse and you can't figure out what to do, what or who usually breaks the deadlock? If you absolutely cannot agree, what do you do?
The eldest.
The eldest? Okay.
9465911.
Which is
What is it?
his number. Look to someone who's the expert in a particular, get another opinion. What else do you do if you just can't break the deadlock?
Talk to God, pray and get an answer.
Pretty long.
Yeah, pray about it. Seek God's guidance. Look it up on the internet.
Google it.
Yeah, Google it. Or something, or someone more reliable. So, how did Joseph receive the brothers when they came back to Egypt.
He was so happy that he had to go and cry.
Yeah. There was all these times where he's just overcome with emotion. Here's my brothers again. And he actually had to go.
Own brother Benjamin.
Yes, he's so excited to see his brother Benjamin. He hasn't seen him in like 17 years.
He throws a party for him at his palace.
Right? Yeah. He welcomes them. And
he entered his chamber and wept.
Yep. He throws this big party, and and they explain, say, I think some mistake was made. We found all of our money in our sacks, and the steward said, "Peace be with you. Don't be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has put treasure in your sacks for you. I received your money." And they brought out Simeon, and then they had this big party for them.
Says the portions were taken to them from Joseph's table.
Mm-hmm.
Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of theirs.
He heaped so much. Everybody got a nice portion, and here's Benjamin's food plate. And so they drank and were merry with him. And so now it's time for them to go. And what instructions does Joseph give?
Cup and Benjamin. Silver.
Yeah. So he gives them they get their food to take home, and what's in the sacks?
Their money, but in verse 32, when they sit down to the feast, he puts them all in numerical order.
Yeah.
All like, huh?
How does he know how to do this? He actually knows what order we are. Yeah. They're just amazed. So Joseph tells them, put each man's money back in the mouth of their sack, and put my cup, my special silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, along with the money for his grain.
Setting a trap.
So what happens when they get just a little ways away from town? Yep. Here comes the steward, and says, "Why have you repaid evil for good? Is not from this that my Lord drinks, and by this that he practices divination? You have done evil in doing this. You've taken my Lord's silver cup." And they're like, "What? No, of course. We would never do that." And they, we brought back the money that was in our sacks last time. Whoever, one of us, if one of us has the cup in his sack, then that person will die. And so they all get out their sacks, and they open them up, and what do they find inside? Benjamin has got the cup. Oh no. What were they afraid was going to happen?
The father would really be dominantly phone.
Yes. And so, what does Judah respond to Joseph? This is verse 18 and following.
He offers himself up.
Yeah. He says, "Please don't take my father's favorite son. Don't take the youngest. Here, you can have me instead." And so, how does that compare with what he had said earlier? Back in chapter 43, he said, "Send the boy with me, will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you and also our little ones. I will be a pledge for his safety. From my hand you shall require him. If I don't bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. So how had Judah changed over the years?
He's trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, he was finally starting to want to do the right thing, because way back in chapter 37, when they were angry with this dreamer, upstart young Joseph, Judah was the one that said, hey, let's sell him into slavery. So how has he changed over the years?
Is he the one that went back after a while? And instead of let's not kill him?
No, that was Reuben. Yeah, Reuben was the one that was saying, no, we shouldn't do this. In fact, Reuben was the one that said, let's throw him in, let's not kill him, let's throw him in this pit. Because he was hoping that he'd be able to rescue him later. But then that caravan came along and Judah said, hey, let's get some money out of this. We'll get rid of him same way. So, can you think of a time in your life when, like Joseph, you've given your brothers or sisters or someone else a chance to prove themselves or to be reconciled? Or can you think of a time when that opportunity has been given to you, where you had the chance to be reconciled with someone? The humbling experience, isn't it? To have someone, that you've wronged forgive you and give you a chance to start over. So what finally put Joseph over the edge? Yeah.
I think it was Judah saying, if Benjamin doesn't go back, our father will die.
Right. Yep. So, in every single one of them, Joseph, yeah. So Judah had finally said, if I don't bring him back to my father, then I'm going to bear the blame before my father all my life. Please let me stay as a servant. How can I go back, to my father if the boy's not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my brother, that would find my father. That my father's going to die if I don't come back with him, or if he doesn't come back. I'll stay instead. And finally, he couldn't control himself. This is chapter 45. So he sends all the Egyptians out and finally reveals himself. He says, I'm Joseph. Is my father still alive? And
he wept aloud.
Yeah, he wept openly.
Egyptians even heard it.
Well, they were probably listening at the door.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Like any good servant, let's go, we gotta keep going. Why?
Yeah. Can you think of a time when you've wept openly? You just couldn't control the tears, the sobs. But what does Joseph say to reassure his brothers?
I forgive you, it was God's plan.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. God sent me before you to preserve life. And he goes on to say the famine's been here for 2 years, and yet there's going to be another 5 years of famine. There's going to be no plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it wasn't you who sent me here. It was God. He's made me a father to Pharaoh, lord of all his house, ruler of all the land of Egypt. So hurry, go get Dad and bring him down here along with everybody. Now, I'm going to provide for you. There's still 5 years of famine to come.
To let the whole flock.
Yeah.
Especially when there's nothing grazing.
Right.
Oh,
Right. So they went back home and told their dad about all this. And how did he respond? How did he react when he heard the news?
He didn't believe them until he saw the wagons that were sent along to move them.
Right. Yep. Yeah, he sent them all kinds of stuff. All the food that they needed for the journey, changes of clothes, and Benjamin he gave 5 changes of clothes and 300 shekels of silver, and 10 donkeys loaded with good things from Egypt, and 10 female donkeys with grain, bread, and provisions for the journey. So they came back and they told him Joseph's still alive. He is ruler of the whole land of Egypt. And how did he react?
I didn't believe him at first.
Right? Yeah, but then he saw all this stuff and his spirit revived. He's like, okay, Joseph's alive. I'll go see him before I die. So now we're in chapter 46. How did Pharaoh receive them when they came to Egypt?
He gave them land and,
In Goshen,
Yeah. Found out, he treated them really well. Gave them the best of the land.
Well, that was the delta of the Nile, the land of Goshen, so very plush.
Yeah.
And for the
Really good.
birds,
Really good grazing land. Yeah, exactly. So there's another interesting thing here about what happened. This is in chapter 47 now. What happened during the rest of the famine? Yeah.
just back up for a second in
Sure.
46.
Yep.
He tells them in 33 and on, he says, when you talk to Pharaoh, tell him you're shepherd, because the Egyptians don't like shepherds, so they'll give you a place away from everybody else so they don't have to deal with the Egyptians.
Yep. So Goshen was a little further away from the major cities and so forth. Yep. But yeah, look at verse 47, chapter 47, verse 13 and following there. No food. Famine was very severe. And so all the people of Egypt are coming to Pharaoh's storehouses to buy grain. And they keep doing that until they run out of money. And so what do they give next to be able to keep buying more food during the rest of the famine? Yep. They give all their livestock to Pharaoh. So now Pharaoh has all the money, all of the livestock. They run out of their animals and they're still hungry as the famine is continuing. What happened next? Gave them their land. Yep. And what after that? Yeah. they give themselves to be Pharaoh's slaves. So he was saving, Joseph was saving the people by providing food, but he also enslaved them at the same time.
Verse 22 in my version is cool in a way. It says, the only land he did not buy was a land belonging to the priests. They received an allotment of food directly from Pharaoh, so they didn't need to sell their land.
Yep, and then after that, you're required that at the harvests, you will always give a fifth to Pharaoh. So that's a double tithe of everything, so that, and so you've saved our lives. We will be servants to Pharaoh.
I wonder why it's only a fifth goes instead of a tenth.
That's a fifth is more.
Yeah, I know, but what we heard before, a tenth, now it's a fifth.
Well, so a tenth is the tithe. That's the biblical standard for giving that gets lifted up by Moses.
So he increased it.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that was increased over the Egyptians, not over the Jews.
Right. Yep. So they settled in the land, but so Joseph both saved and enslaved the people. How does that kind of set up the next book?
Government.
What's that?
When Joseph died and that Pharaoh died, pretty soon people forgot that they liked the Israelites.
Yeah. So the Israelites multiplied. They were very fruitful people, and eventually the new Pharaoh didn't know the story about Joseph and saw these people as a threat.
Sure, once the Nile floods came back again and the crops started coming in, good times roll. I wonder if Jacob ever realized how much trouble his favoritism caused him and his family.
Yeah.
I have an idea, it never dawned on him.
Not in that amount, for sure. So now at the end of chapter 47, Jacob is, at the end of his life, and so he has Joseph come with his two boys, Ephraim and Manasseh, and who is supposed to get the larger inheritance between, if you have two sons back in those days?
The older son.
The older one. Yep. The older one is to receive the blessing as well. And so in verse 9, he says, bring your sons to me so I may bless them. And then, Joseph took, Ephraim, the oldest, and, so that he could get the blessing of the oldest. And then, the other way around. Manasseh was to be towards Israel's right hand, and Ephraim, the second born, was to be blessed by his left hand, since he's the youngest. But what does Jacob do? He crossed his hands. Why do you think he did that?
Because he liked Jacob more than he did his older brothers. Similar to that.
Yeah, the same thing had happened with Jacob. He was the conniver, the one who had stolen his older brother's blessing. Can you think of other times where God has blessed, instead of the firstborn, the second instead, or the youngest?
Besides Jacob and Esau.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Isaac and Ishmael.
Yeah.
Cain and Abel. He
recognized and accepted Abel's offering and not Cain's. So it's like God loves to kind of turn things upside down from how we tend to want them to be. He has kind of an upside down kingdom. So then, after this, so he's put Ephraim before Manasseh. So it's interesting. Ephraim is the tribe from which that became like the greatest of all of the northern tribes of Israel.
Jacob knew that. That's why. Jacob knew that was going to happen. God.
Yep. So then he brings all the rest of them together. So he's kind of taken Ephraim and Manasseh as his own sons in place of Joseph. And Levi gets, the tribe of Levi later gets set apart to be the priests, so they don't receive an inheritance when they, Moses, hundreds of years later brings them into the promised land. And then in chapter 49, there's this long poem where Jacob blesses all of his sons. Some of them, he has really nice things to say about, and some of them he doesn't.
Verse 5 puts it quite bluntly for Simeon and Levi.
Yeah. Weapons of violence are in their swords. Let my soul not come into their counsel, for in their anger they killed men, hamstrung oxen. Cursed be their anger. I will divide them in Jacob. I'll scatter them in Israel.
But yet, Levi's tribe was made the priests.
Right, they were made the priests, but they were also scattered because they didn't get a land of their own. They didn't get a little section.
You got like different refuge cities.
Yeah, they had little individual cities, and then they were the ones that would come to the temple to work there.
And when people stopped going to the temple, they had to find someplace else to get the food.
Right. Yep. Judah. Somebody read verses 8 through 10 of chapter 49. This is the blessing for Judah.
Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, Judah. You return from prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down, like a lioness who dares to rouse him. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nation shall be his.
So, what do you hear what echoes do you hear there that get fulfilled later in the tribe of Judah? The Christmas story. Say more. Say more. What do you mean?
About the tribe of Judah being the one where Jesus comes from.
Exactly. And before him, what other king comes from Judah's line? David. Exactly. So all the way back here in the beginning, at the end of Genesis, there is this prophecy of there will be, Judah will be the greatest, and a king shall come from you, the scepter shall not depart from Judah. So it really points forward to David, but then also to Jesus, who is the lion of the tribe of Judah.
11 and 12 has to be kind of funny for the ladies on the altar guild, because it says, he washes his clothes in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth are whiter than milk.
Yeah.
We got to be careful with the grape juice staining the communion linen. But here it says his teeth never are anything but white.
Yeah. So it's kind of you will be prosperous.
That's when they invented dawn.
Exactly.
Yep. So every one of the blessings that Jacob gave to his sons came true in different ways. And then,
That verse 27 about Benjamin, Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning devouring the prey, and at evening dividing the spoil.
Yep. And yeah. So then Jacob dies. Now, what do the other brothers start to worry about now that their father is dead?
Now Joseph is going to get his revenge.
They thought, oh man, Dad are not around anymore. He's going to give us what we deserve. And so, what do they tell him? This is so chapter 50, verse 15 and following.
While being Jewish, it says the physicians embalmed Israel, Jacob. I didn't think that they embalmed.
Oh, yeah, the Egyptians definitely did.
No, I mean, that's for Israel.
Right, Jacob. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's Jewish.
Yep. They
Well, they had to keep them, they didn't know how long.
Right.
Before they went
Yeah,
back.
because he specifically told them, I want you to take my bones back to Egypt, or from Egypt back to Canaan. Right. Yep. And that was the practice of the Egyptians back then.
They do that.
Oh, it's a long process.
Yeah.
I read an article in National Geographic recently about the crazy long process because they've excavated these places that they dug down into the ground to do all this embalming.
A lot of salt.
It's a really grotesque process,
Sure.
actually.
They didn't have the equipment up
Well,
there.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really want to know the answer.
Yeah.
You don't want to know the details.
If I remember correctly from what they found in some of the pharaoh's tombs, some of the organs were buried separately.
Right. Yep. They did all kinds of crazy things to preserve and make them look as lifelike as possible. So the brothers are worried that Jacob's going to get his revenge, but instead, and so they say, Dad said, please forgive your brothers. And they came and fell down before him, just like his dreams, and said, please forgive the transgressions of the servants of God, of the God of your father. And Joseph weeps again. And he says, am I in the place of God? And then this verse is a really important one. Verse 20. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. How have you seen those words? You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. How have you seen that get played out in your own life? Or in somebody else's life? Something that was meant for evil, God ended up turning around.
Not yet. Haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. So we have to wait for the day that he makes all things, sets everything right.
Just gonna say, sometimes you don't get an answer right away, or see it.
Yep.
Until it could be years later.
Yeah, but God's in the business of taking what the enemy means for evil and turning it into good, using it for our own benefit. Even the struggles that we go through build endurance and character. Paul talks about how character produces hope because God's love has been poured into our hearts. It can even take the most terrible things like being sold into slavery and turn it into something good to save many people. So then Joseph finally gets old and dies. And his last request at the very end of the book is, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. So how is that last request connected to God's promises? What do we know happens in the
God
next
will
book?
eventually free him from slavery.
Yeah. Yep. Eventually, God will bring them out of Egypt. They'd made a special journey with Jacob's bones, but that didn't happen with Joseph's until when? 400 years later in the Exodus. When Moses and the people leave, they take Joseph's bones with them. Yep. So, this book of beginnings, what Genesis means, can teach us a lot about our own roots, about the faith of our families before us, about our own faith, and about God's promises. So, let's close with prayer. Lord, thank you for the way that you work through your word and through the stories of your people to shape us and to strengthen our faith. Lord, we can see ourselves all too often in the mistakes and the words of your people, all the ways that they've messed up along the way. But you gave them grace and forgiveness and a new start over and over again. And so thank you for the new beginning that you have given us in Jesus, and how in him all of your promises are yes. The next 2 weeks, we're going to be walking through a study called Disciple Orientation, Purposeful Living. We have, this past week, we had 12 people that came for our Welcome to St. Peter's class. And so this is this disciple orientation is for any of them that are able to come, but also for all of you and anybody else in the congregation. I'm going to talk about it a little bit about in the announcements today. We'll focus on God's purposes for our lives all the way through Scripture, kind of focused around 4 words that all start with G: gather, grow, give, and go in mission. So invites other people to join us.
You're turning into an old man?